We are joined in the studio this afternoon by United States Senator Roy Blunt. How are you, Senator?
I'm just wondering if I was on a hit list, if I wouldn't be endorsing too. I'd say, what does it take to get off the hit list?
Well, I think that's part of the goal. By the way, do you have a cordial, warm relationship with Senator Clinton? Did you ever get to know her at all?
No, I don't.
Really?
I know her, and
you can say whatever you want. You don't have to endorse her.
No, I don't. She has a lot of talent, but I've never spent any time with her.
Yeah. I think there's this.
I'd say she's
sometimes
tough-minded and knowledgeable. I would think that.
Well, was she was, by the time you got there, she was already out of the Senate. Yeah, right. So
she was I guess when I went to the Congress, she was the first lady. And then she was in the Senate when I was in the House, but I never saw her a single time when she was in the Senate and I was in the House.
Well, welcome back to Missouri. How are things?
The weather's good, and snow's melting, and
yes,
ready for the next onslaught of the winter here.
Let me play you another soundbite. This is the Senate leader, Harry Reid, and what he said last week. I want to get your reaction to this.
It's encouraging that some of my Republican colleagues seem to be regaining their grip on sanity this week. Republicans have shown a willingness to compromise to restore veterans' hard-earned pensions. A few reasonable House Republicans were willing to join Democrats to avert a catastrophic default on our nation's obligations. A default that would have thrown our economy into a tailspin and damaged this nation's standing in the world. I commend Speaker Boehner for doing the right thing. He voted for this and got enough Republican votes to get it done.
So the part that caught my attention, Senator, was that he feels like the Republicans are restoring sanity. I think alleging that you were a little insane and your party was a little insane on some of these issues. What did you think about that comment?
Well, I don't understand a lot of what Senator Reid says, and
No.
I think the Senate would be better off if he'd let us get back to the way business is supposed to be done, voting on the appropriations bills, having a budget, just the things that are the fundamental things that you have to do for the government to function and for people to be able to transparently see what you're doing. I think one of the great losses of the country under Senator Reid's leadership has been the total willingness not to follow the normal way of doing things in a above-board, transparent way. Harry Reid became the Senate leader long before I went to the Senate. It was 7 years ago. The appropriations process, where we actually decide the real power of the Congress to decide how to spend the money, the appropriations process hasn't worked one single time for 7 years.
Until this year, right?
No, this year it was one big bill that had everything in one bill, as opposed to you have hearings, you talk about what ought to be on the bill, you bring these bills to the floor, 12 of them, one at a time, you let every member that wants to come and say, no, I think you should spend this $1 million here instead of here, and if the people that can't defend the bill, or maybe they say, we don't think you should spend this $1 million at all, that's the way the business is supposed to be done. And if I had one piece of advice for Senator Reid, it would be get back to doing the people's business in a public and open way like it's supposed to be done, and defend whatever bill goes to the floor. Let people try to amend it. And the people that take it to the floor, the committee chairman and others, let them say, this is why we think this is what we ought to do to defend the country. This is what we ought to do to build this project. This is how we ought to fund medical research. If somebody thinks we ought to fund medical research in a different way, let them propose that and let the Senate and the House vote.
How did you vote on the debt limit ceiling?
I voted not to move forward. I think extending the debt limit without changing behavior is a mistake. Clearly
President Obama once felt that way.
He apparently did.
When he was in the Senate, he felt that way. He thought it was reckless and irresponsible to keep raising the debt limit. This seems to somehow get forgotten. But there is this allegation that if you cast a vote like that, like you did against the debt limit, that you're voting for the U.S. to default on its obligations.
That's not true. There is that allegation, and you're exactly right. You saying it's not true, but saying people say it all the time.
People say it all the time, right?
And it's just not true. The debt of the country is going to be paid. The question is, what are you going to do about the new bills that you're putting out there, the new money that you're spending, the new money you're borrowing, and anybody that went to the banker and said, "Look, I've used up my line of credit, and I'd like to extend it, and I don't intend to change my behavior." The banker's going to say, "Hey, there's no way we can do that."
It was interesting. Senator McCaskill, when she was on with me last week, she used a different analogy. What she said is, if you buy a truck and then all of a sudden you decide that you're not going to make the payments on the truck, well, the bank's going to come down and say, "Hey, wait a second." My point to her was, well, that's not the right analogy. If you buy a truck for $40,000 and your loan is 35 or whatever, and then all of a sudden they raise the amount of the loan, which is essentially the correct analogy. You're not paying your bills on a car payment. I mean, the analogy only works if you're increasing the amount of the loan continuously, which is what we're doing. Now, I understand that you can't default on the debts, but I think what you and others are saying in the Senate and the House is we have to have some conditions to get control of the spending, and we don't seem to still be getting to that point.
That's right. You have to have some conditions. How are we going to reform these programs? 62% of the money that the federal government spends now is on literally on autopilot. It's a program. Many of these programs are 40 and 50 years old that we've never had the super majorities that it took to put them in place to adjust them demographically. Medicare, Social Security. Clearly, those programs need to last because people rely on them. But they're not going to meet the needs of the future unless you begin to adjust the means testing. If you begin to adjust the age of qualification, the things that the Congress should do. And if you're not doing that, you're just putting off the inevitable and actually making the problem much worse. We're literally leaving a bill here for somebody else to pay. That's the real analogy. Young workers today and kids who are in elementary school today are going to get this bill for something that the Congress of the United States say, "Oh, well, let's just keep doing what we've been doing." But
the other allegation, I think, by people, and some of this might be fair, is that Republicans aren't serious either about the spending, and they just want to play politics with this president.
Well, I've really advocated a lot of change in these programs in a very public way, and we need to increase the age for Social Security. We need to increase the age for Medicare. You have to do it in a way that gives people time to plan for it. I don't know how much more serious than that I could be. That's what I'm for, and I've said that for some time now. It is the biggest part of the solution to the entitlement programs. And then, frankly, we need to get the rest of the government where it runs like the country does. The country is way ahead of the government in terms of looking at new ways to do things, looking at new technology, looking at new ways to communicate. The government, as I heard you talking about earlier, the Jimmy Kimmel, government can't even run a website. There's nothing easier in the world to do than run a website, and the government can't even figure out how to run a website with 4.5 years' notice.
I know we sort of figured that out. Hold on. Senator Blunt is with me in studio. I want to talk about Obamacare. I want to talk about the CBO report on jobs, too, and a whole lot. Big win again today. Chris Kerber is going to join us. We'll talk a little bit about the future of the tournament and also the Blues that are playing in the Olympics right now, and also TJ Oshie, what happened over the weekend. Senator Roy Blunt is with me in studio. Before we get back to the issues, I want to thank you for sending a certificate to my son. He became an Eagle Scout recently, and I don't know how much he appreciates all that. I handed him a few letters. One of them was yours. One of them was from Congressman Ryan. He was nice enough to send one to Ann Wagner. So I thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Well, good for him. Good for him. Being an Eagle Scout's a big thing, and it's something that says a lot about you your whole life. So
it's a good accomplishment. Absolutely. Why? This may be a rhetorical question for you, Senator Blunt. Why can't we get the Keystone Pipeline approved by this administration?
Just pure extremist supporters of the administration are the only thing that stops that. It's an irrational thing not to do. We're the logical customers. The Canadians are going to sell that oil. They're going to sell it to the Asians or to us, and we're the much better customer for them, and they're the much better person for us to buy from. They're our best trading partner. There's nothing wrong, Mark, with buying things from people that don't like you. But there's something terribly wrong of having to buy things from people who don't like you, particularly when you could buy things from your closest friends, or even better if you can produce your own energy. But producing these products in a competitive way yourself, or buying them from your best and closest trading partners, is clearly the better thing to do.
It's one of those issues where I think even Senator McCaskill is on your side on this issue. I think that's right. But why is there, I'm sure that there's pressure that is applied to the administration. What kind of answers do you get when you bring this up?
Well, the State Department, both under Secretary Clinton and Secretary Kerry, have issued reports that said we should do this. The president's Secretary of Interior, who just left a few months ago, Secretary Salazar, said just a couple of weeks ago he's for the Keystone Pipeline. The energy advisor, when he left, said he's for the Keystone Pipeline. Anybody that understands economics would be for the Keystone Pipeline. The only people opposed to it are people who are just fundamentally opposed to fossil fuels. They're the same people that are opposed to coal. They're the same people that are opposed to gas. They're the same people that are opposed to oil. They're the same people that are opposed to fracking.
Opposed to everything, right?
And there is no simpler economic formula in America today than more American energy equals more American jobs. And it's not just the jobs that makes the energy; it's the jobs that happen when people realize you've got a reliable utility bill and a dependable delivery system.
I think those groups think that wind is going to and solar energy is going to solve all the problems. I have nothing against.
I'm not opposed to any of it if it ever works.
Sustainable, absolutely. The CBO came out today. I'm going to get into this in the next hour. I think when you were with me here last, we talked about the minimum wage, and the many people who, and I think even Senator Reed, going back to him, feel like Republicans don't care about people who are out of work. The CBO has a report that shows 500,000 jobs would be lost if we raise the minimum wage by 2016 is the figure. Now, that same report does say that people making the minimum wage right now, some of them would be pushed up over the poverty rate. So I don't know if there are arguments for both sides here, but what did you think about that report?
Well, I think people getting to work is an important thing. And anytime you create an obstacle from people getting to work or people working as much as they want to, the other CBO report, the Congressional Budget Office report that came out about 10 or 12 days ago was the report that there'd be 2.3 million fewer full-time jobs or full-time equivalent jobs. This means 2.3 million fewer jobs is what this really means because of Obamacare. Because people are going to be put into part-time jobs, people are going to create part-time jobs. The administration tried to put their best face on and say, well, really people don't want to work and they're in this work trap and now they can get insurance without working. A government policy that encourages people not to work, or a government policy that when you put it in place is going to eliminate the opportunity for 500,000 people to get that first job. People need, the minimum wage job is not the goal. The minimum wage job is the launching pad. And the more people you can put on the launching pad, the more people begin to work their way up through the system and have opportunity for themselves and the people they care about.
So the headline on what you just said about Obamacare was the GOP thinks Obamacare is making you lazy. That's how that was summed up in some quarters.
Exactly. And I think I was on Fox News Sunday. That's Sunday. And I said, surely a government policy that discourages people from working all they want to work isn't a good thing. And that was widely reported by Democrats. Oh, Senator Blunt thinks that the government shouldn't discourage. Absolutely, I think the government shouldn't discourage people from working. People should be allowed to work as they want to work, as they want to create opportunity. The other thing about the minimum wage, too, we're in this 30-hour economy now or less because of Obamacare for so many people. At $10.10, you make the same amount of money in 30 hours as current minimum wage you make in 40. But what really matters is working 40 hours and making more money. Trying to get yourself where you launch yourself into work.
Tell one more thing before I let you go here. Explain the Monument Men legislation that you have. There's this movie out now called The Monuments Men.
It is, and it's got a Missourian, John Goodman, in it, and in fact, the Soldiers Memorial right close to where we are,
right outside our window.
That he is rough. He is loosely formed around a sculptor from St. Louis. Hancock, who was one of the Monuments Men. These were 350 people, mostly Americans, but from the Allied cause that spent their time in World War II trying to protect the great treasures of Europe as long as they could do that without cost of Allied lives. And they didn't know they were Monuments Men because the original plan of President Roosevelt, bought into by General Eisenhower and others, was that they would be protecting buildings so we wouldn't needlessly bomb the Leaning Tower of Pisa, for instance. But as it turned out, the Nazis were such thugs and looters that they spent an awful lot of their time trying to recover stolen art and stolen sculpture. By 1951, they discovered they had recovered more than 5 million pieces of art that the Nazis had stolen and restored them back to their owners. I was just out at the St. Louis, the library here, and the art museum here, rather, and two of the pieces of art, 1540 pieces of art, are there that were two of the pieces of art that were restored to their owners by the monuments men right after World War II.
So the bill would do what?
It would honor the 350 people that did that, two of which died but were shot. These were not, their principal duty was not soldiers, but they were doing dangerous things. This would honor the 350 people that served in that with the Congressional Gold Medal for their great efforts during the war. And obviously this movie with George Clooney and John Goodman and others is calling some special attention to that.
I haven't seen the movie yet. I was on vacation a couple weeks ago. I missed that one. Senator Blunt, always good to have you.
Great to be with you. See you soon.